Episode 7. Here we are. Hello, everybody. We're in the middle of July already. I'm Eve Sturgis, and you're listening to my podcast, Everything's Relative, where we talk about all the ways that mail-in DNA kits are changing the world, specifically, but how DNA surprises are affecting people. So welcome. Today, I'm going to play my phone interview with Dick. It was the first time... you guys, it was the first time I'd ever used this new online podcast phone technology. There's probably a cooler and easier way to say that, but we had so many hiccups in the beginning. There was something about plugging in my earphones into my computer to interview Dick that made my music play, and oh my God, it was there's so much music on my computer, and it kept playing the thrift shop song, and so I could hear it in my ears. Dick couldn't hear it, but it was just total chaos, and we had to stop and start so many times. So I was so embarrassed, and I've been so stressed out for the past few months, thinking that the whole recording would have to be scrapped. But it didn't. It was fine. It was great. The technology worked despite Macklemore coming on in every time we tried to talk. So I'm so relieved that I get to play this episode for you now. So the sort of side story of all this is that one thing about me in real life, or not podcast related, is that for the past year, I have actually been traveling from Los Angeles to West Virginia every 4 to 6 weeks. For non-podcast or DNA reasons. Although it is for family, so you could argue that I'm going for DNA reasons. But anyway, I thought that one time I was going out there and realized I'd have a little bit of free time. So I thought that I would just reach out on Facebook and see if anyone in the NPE community was in or around or near this small town that I have to be in all the time. And I found this man named Dick. So we keep in touch and we commiserate about our NPE experiences and the growing culture of the NPE world, and we sort of share bits about our own lives. We haven't gotten actually to meet up in West Virginia yet, but we're definitely planning on it, and I'll be back out there in the fall. So so I like having a friend out there. And we just sort of share little bits about each other. Dick is probably the nicest man in West Virginia, if not America. He and his wife have therapy dogs that they take to hospitals. He tutors young people who want to take their GEDs. He volunteers his time to the NPE support group as an administrator. So he helps screen applicants and welcome them into the group. It's every minute of his free time is spent being of service to others. And then he also spends some free time talking with me and sharing his story. So it's just a part of who he is, but it felt important to get it down on tape. So let's get into it. This is Everything's Relative. I'm Eve Sturgis. This is my conversation with my friend Dick, episode 7.
Staying with her. I have a younger brother and sister. And
sorry, I have to stop you. We have to. This is so embarrassing. Just start again with when your wife got you the test. Just start over from there.
Okay.
So what got you into this?
I got an ancestry DNA test for Christmas 2017 from my wife. She had seen me get very interested in genealogy. My mother had dementia for the last several years of her life. She passed away in October of 2017. But my younger brother and younger sister, my only two siblings, took turns staying with her for 12-hour shifts until we finally moved her to assisted living. But she had no real short-term memory left, but her long-term memory was very good. And she had 8 brothers and sisters. and she remembered all their names, middle names, birthdays, most of their children. The long-term memory was really good, and I think it made her feel good to be able to talk about something and know what she was talking about
Yeah,
on whatever
absolutely.
level,
That must have been so grounding
what,
for her.
yeah, whatever level, that she was aware that she was having memory problems. But, then she couldn't remember that she'd had lunch 15 minutes ago, but,
Right.
which is, again, a typical scenario. But so I got into that, and I hadn't had a whole lot of connection with her family. They lived on the far eastern end of West Virginia, and we're at the far western end.
Hmm.
And we didn't go to the small town where she was from very often. I mean, in the pre-interstate days, it was like a 6-hour drive.
Right.
So, yeah, so I didn't really know too many of those. She said, well, you've got 3 dozen first cousins, you know, but
Oh my gosh,
she
that's a
could
lot.
name most of them. But yeah, well, 8 brothers and sisters,
Right.
two of them had 10 kids each. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah,
Yeah, that'll
but
do it.
yeah. And then on my father's side, my paternal grandfather had divorced. He and my grandmother had gotten a divorce in the early 40s, and he was totally out of the picture and never heard from again. And I didn't know a whole lot about, the my father's family going back very
Hmm.
far, except on his mother's side, but not his father's side. So those were kind of mysteries, but I didn't know that much about the DNA test at the time. I never really would have done one on my own, but when my wife got me one, I did it.
Did
And
she get one for herself?
no, no, and
Okay.
she still doesn't want to do one, especially now after what's happened with me.
Right,
Uh,
watching the worst case scenario go down.
yeah, but so I got I think I waited a little while after Christmas before I did it. So I got the results back, I think, in March of 18. And, I got the ethnicity thing that's one of the things, they advertise a lot.
Hmm.
Find out, where your roots were. And they were pretty much where I expected: England, Ireland, Scotland, Northern Europe, a little bit of Sweden.
Hmm.
Nothing surprising or earth shattering or anything like that. And then you get that list of DNA matches. And there's a whole
Right.
bunch of names that didn't ring a bell at all. I couldn't figure out who these people were. I did have a great grandmother on my father's side who had been adopted. So I figured, well,
Hmm.
maybe some of those are her family at some level. And,
Right.
and then again, there was some mystery about the paternal grandfather. Maybe he had another family or other, offspring after he disappeared from our part of the world. But
Yeah.
there were 8 of my top 10 were, 2 of them were my mom's side. I recognized them, but 8 of the top 10 were just names I didn't know, and there were nobody of my surname or my grandmother's surname, paternal grandmother's surname, or maiden name, whatever. And
Was it
but
just I don't know how the I don't know, I'm sorry to interrupt.
oh,
I don't
that's
know how
fine.
the results sort of show up. Did it show that those 8 of the 10 that you didn't recognize, did it indicate whether they were on paternal or maternal side?
No, no, it doesn't
Okay.
indicate.
Okay.
But again, I definitely
Right.
recognized 2 of the people on mom's side, and so I figured the other 8 had to be, on my father's side, and
Right.
but
I was just
I was
thinking
just
with so many
clueless.
cousins.
Yeah,
I was just thinking with so many
yeah.
cousins that I would have just been like, well, I don't know everybody and who's married to who.
Well, I mean, I asked my mother. I think no, I didn't. I'm
Hmm.
sorry. Cut. No, that's not right, because she had passed already by the time I took the test.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, but I was asked a few of the relatives I knew, and they didn't know.
Hmm.
On mom's side, they didn't recognize those names. Um, so anyway, I just went along like that for a few months, which is I kind of get the feeling now, and with 2020 hindsight, maybe I knew there was something up, because that's not me. When
Hmm.
I had cancer, I tried to get every word I could find about it, know exactly what could happen, what would happen,
Hmm.
just be as educated as possible. And this is like, I just threw up my hands. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So the big thing that happened was a distant cousin on my mother's side contacted me through the Ancestry messaging system and said, this is who I am. You match me. You match my grandmother. You match my great uncle. Again, this is on my mom's side.
Right.
And, and I do a lot. And she says, and I'll give you her first name because she's an angel. She became my search angel. A second
Mm.
cousin, three times removed, I'd never heard of, lives in New
Wow.
Mexico. And, but her name's Amber, and I can't thank her enough for what she ended up doing for me. But so she said, if you would please download your DNA, and she told me how to do it all, and from Ancestry, and upload it to those other three, Family Tree DNA and My Heritage and GED Match or GED Match, however you say that.
Uh-huh.
She said, I do things like DNA painting, tracing which parts of which chromosomes come from which ancestors. I mean, she's really into it. And
Whoa.
I think she's entirely self-taught at this. But
Wow.
so I said, yeah, I'll do that. And then my ADD kicked in, and I didn't really do that because I was kind of, again, maybe subconsciously staying away from it all. But several months later, maybe not until like November or December, I think I finally downloaded and uploaded and all that and told her it was out there. And she told me how to look at some of the compares on those sites. And at one of the matches, or one of the sites, there's my niece, my
Hmm.
brother's youngest daughter, and she had found she had done a 23andMe test that you can upload either kind to I think this was at GED Match, and so I messaged Amber and I said, well, you've got another distant cousin you can work with there. This matches, and told her who it was. And then the fateful day arrived, December 28th. Amber messages me and says, when we were still messaging through the Ancestry
Hmm.
system, and she said, I've got some news for you, and it's going to be upsetting. And I said, okay. I said, why don't we become Facebook friends here? We can message easier. So we did. And
Hmm.
she said, well, you and your niece only match at 1,000 centimorgans, CMs, which another
Hmm.
term that's become ingrained in me.
Right.
And I said, okay, what does that mean? And she said, well, an uncle niece should match at about 1,800 on average, and at least 1,300. And I said, okay, what does that mean?
Right. Sure.
you
Yeah.
know, and the
Walk me through
baby
this.
steps here, Amber. Yeah. And she's like, well, that means that one of your parents was not your biological parent because your niece has DNA from both of them through your brother, but you only have DNA from one. That's why the match isn't there. And it's got to be your dad because I match you on your mom's side.
Right.
And like, oh boy, how on earth could that be? I my parents were married 6 years before I was born.
Hmm.
They really, really, really were trying hard to have a child. We think, from what my sister has told me, think that maybe mom had a miscarriage or two along the way there. But when I was born, they named me after everybody. I have two middle names. They tried to cover all the male name bases there because they weren't sure they'd ever get another one, maybe. Of course, then
Right.
my
So you're the
brother came.
oldest.
I am the oldest. My brother came along 2 years later, and they totally made up his name. Or at least there's nobody with either of his first or middle name in our family. So,
They've used them all.
and then my sister 5 years after that. So, yeah. So, okay. So, what do we do now, Amber?
Right.
And I
Yeah.
said,
Wow. So
I kept, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, how did you, were you able to process the suggestion at the time?
Well, I was kind of numb but I've always been really interested in data and thinking logically, as with a computer science degree, did a lot of programming and database design and things like that. And so I'm like, okay, I'm not afraid of the truth here. Just tell me what's the truth. And she said,
Right.
I'll take your matches and do, what do they call them, mirror trees and things like that, and put together a scenario, to see who your biological father was. Okay, you know, and she
Right.
told me a little bit about what
Wow.
she
So
was doing as she went along.
she even knew what to do. Like I wouldn't even know where to start.
She had found both of her grandfathers were not, who they should have been or whatever.
Oh,
So she had some experience at that. She's
right.
worked with a cousin who was adopted, I think, and she had done this a lot. Just totally, like I say, just as an amateur search angel for people. But I think I thanked her every 10 minutes for everything she was
Right.
doing. She probably got tired of seeing that. But so over the next few weeks, she looked and worked and whatever, and came back with a name for me, and it was a man named Emmett. And well, he obviously he passed away. I'll go ahead and give his name. It's
Hmm.
and so we're looking into who he was, and he passed away 9 months after I was born, at age 29. Um,
Oh.
yeah, he had a heart attack, basically. And I was able, in West Virginia, they've got a lot of old death certificates and the vital statistics stuff on at the state level. So I found his death
Hmm.
certificate, and he had rheumatic fever as a child, like at age 9. And that's
Hmm.
that's a disease you don't hear much about anymore. It went away with a
Right. But
lot
it
of
makes your
better
heart weak.
antibiotics and things. So, but it had damaged his heart, and he died then, at, like I say, at age 29.
Mm.
So I've got that information now. I think maybe that was a week or two after that December 28th date. So I go to tell my brother and sister everything now, and I'm telling them the story, and I talk about Emmett, and I said he was married to a woman named Ruby. And my sister says, "Is that Ruby?" and gives me another last name than the one I had for her. But I looked and I said, "Well, that was who she married after Emmett, after Emmett died."
Oh.
And she said, "Well, Mom stayed in touch with her for, until she passed away about 8 years ago." So, the plot thickens, and come to find out that
Uh-huh.
Ruby is also the sister of a woman that married one of my mom's brothers, and they were one of the ones that had 10 kids there.
Oh.
So there was definite connection, and come to find out, Ruby was my mom's best friend, really, growing up in their smaller town than the small town that all this took place in. And
Hmm.
so, and it ends up Emmett and Ruby were married the year after my parents, and lived there in the same town. As a matter of fact, lived a block away. Emmett had been, I think, a year ahead of my father at the high school there. And, so they definitely knew each other and did things together and that kind of thing. So somehow, and the big thing that's missing, and the big neon letters that kept flashing in my brain, is like, why? You know,
Yeah.
at the point of my conception, Emmett and Ruby had been married for 5 years. My parents had been married for 6. It wasn't like anything that happened at the start of or a break in a relationship or anything. So
Right.
that big why is missing.
And there's no one to talk to
No one to talk to. No, Emmett's, like
or
I
no
say,
one to
Ruby's
ask.
gone. Emmett's gone. His siblings are gone. There were a couple nieces that were not even teenagers when he died. But then my sister says, well, Ruby had a daughter, and we'll just call her C, because she is living. And she's, why don't you contact her? So I contact her, and she said, well, I was always told that I was Emmett's daughter. He's on my birth certificate, even though I was born the year before he and Ruby got married. And so she said, I'll bet we're half siblings. And I said, well, would you take a DNA test if I paid for it? And she said, well, I will, but I'm sure we're half siblings. And I said, I'm not believing anything without, for a while here. And so she took the test, and she is not. She is not Emmett's daughter. So I had to give her the news that Amber gave me, and say, yeah. So here, I didn't even know what an NPE was, and I had my own event, and then I had to convey the news to cause somebody else's event, within 3 months. But there was a kicker on C's test. I said, you do have a half sister that I think you don't know about. And we'll call her G. And by the time I told C about this, I'd already talked to G and found out that she had been Ruby's daughter like 3 years after Emmett died. Ruby wasn't remarried or anything, so she gave her up for adoption. And G knew about that and had tried contacting Ruby about 20 years earlier. G is now 58, I think. C is 68. And she tried contacting Ruby through a social worker, and Ruby said, well, nobody in my family, I did all this in secret, and nobody knows I had you. I really don't want any contact. I'll give you any medical information you want about your family. But I prefer you not contact me again or my daughter. And G lived up to that. But once I called her, I was managing C's DNA test at Ancestry. Once I called her, she said, well, tell C I would love to have a relationship. I'd like, let her know about me. And they ends up, they live an hour and a half apart. And so the day after I visited, this is about 6 hours away from us, but we had, just again, totally coincidental, we had planned a trip there for a dog training conference. And, yeah, in March.
The same area.
Yeah, same area. So one day I went to see C and told her everything. I was lucky enough to be able to tell her in person, and sat there and held her hand and told her, what I had to tell her, and about G, and said, I'm going to be having lunch with G tomorrow. Can we call you after lunch and I'll introduce you to? And she said, yeah. She was really in shock, although C has told me now several times, I'm really glad to know the truth. She felt like I did. And so so I had lunch with G the next day, and we called her, and they had a nice talk, and she said, can you come visit this weekend? And G couldn't. Actually, they have not met yet in person, just due to some health and work concerns, but they still plan to, obviously. But so that, that's kind of the thing that makes me feel good about this at some point. It's like, well, yeah, I don't know why, and this upset the apple cart, and I got that feeling all of us NPE folks seem to have, that, our sense of self has been disrupted at the very least. And, but I do have that kind of good feeling that C and G, are going to meet, just because of what happened with me. And the one other fun part is that C and G and I are very distantly related, on the order of about 15 or 20 CMs there. So it's not like I have no reason, to ever see them again or talk to them again. Now they're distant cousins too. We haven't figured out exactly what the tree looks like that connects us, but but yeah, so that's
That's
the
fun.
whole that's the whole convoluted story, and it's I'm still assimilating all this. I'm getting some therapy to deal with all this. And I know you're in favor of that. And
Hmm.
and again, it disrupts your sense of self. I told somebody it would be like if you woke up tomorrow and one of your legs was like an inch or two longer than the other one. You'd be able to do what you needed to do, but you'd never feel normal again.
Right. Just
It,
a
it,
little like disorienting.
yeah, yeah. And a few people that I've told the story to, I've told some former coworkers and some relatives. They say, well, everybody's gone. It's not like you have to. You didn't inherit any new siblings. You didn't have to deal with telling your father that raised you, that he's not your biological father. Everything, he's been gone for 23 years, and as I said, my mother 18 months, and the biological father, like I say, when I was 9 months old, and I find myself at times wondering, did he even ever hold me? Just because he was a friend of my parents.
Right.
Yeah, and
Man, so it's you didn't inherit you didn't inherit a lot of things that people are referring to, but you inherited like so many questions that you can't get an answer to.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
I think you're the first person that can't even I don't even know how to describe it. Like you're just you're the last you're the last line
mhm.
of the conversation.
Yeah, yeah. I have spoken to a gentleman who is 90 and still lives in that town and was my father that raised me. He was his best friend in high school,
Hmm.
and he also knew Emmett because he was there in high school too. And it ended up they were in the JCs together there in that town, and they were in the Elks Club together.
Hmm.
And this man said, I remember Emmett. He was a fine young man, and I've read his obituary also, and he did a lot of good things and was very active and that kind of thing in charities and organizations. And I keep saying he sounds like a great guy, except he was married and he got a married woman pregnant. But uh, and but
Right, and there's no way to know if that was even an arrangement they all knew about
yeah,
or something. I don't know.
yeah. But this guy, the 90-year-old friend, said, he said, I just couldn't imagine any reason why that would have happened. He just said, like, your parents were
Hmm.
like the best people I ever knew, and I can't imagine that anything like that happening or any reason it
Hmm.
would have. So there's, that it happened, but nobody knows why.
Right, and I'm sure you have come up with all the reasons,
Yeah,
all the so
yeah.
I
I mean,
mean,
there. Yeah, I. One exercise my therapist has had me do is I wrote a letter to, well, first to my the dad that raised me, his mother, because I was really
hmm.
close to her as my grandmother.
Hmm.
I was the first grandchild. We lived there 2 years, shared a house with them before we moved away. And when the dad that raised me graduated from college, and so that hurt. Really, that hurt more than anything else. Was thinking that I wasn't related to her,
Hmm.
even for all. I've still got all the
Mm.
memories and everything. And her husband, was her second husband, was not my blood relation grandfather, but he couldn't have been a better grandfather. And
Mm. Hmm.
so I know that, but it just still really hurts. And to think about that loss of you know physical blood or DNA connection, and
Sure.
but it just doesn't make sense. My sister is groping for straws somewhat, thinking that, well, maybe there was an RH factor conflict, and because of the miscarriages, maybe they were just trying to have a successful pregnancy or
Right.
something, which there's maybe a chance of that, but kind of amateur sperm donor kind of thing. I'm,
Hmm.
in the 50s. I'm not sure how that would have worked.
Yeah, no way to know. So when you told your brother and sister about all of this, um, how did they feel about it?
Well, they didn't want to believe it. I mean, they just said there has
Uh-huh.
to be a mistake, which I know that's a lot of people's reaction too. And I told my wife, I said, I don't want to hear, anytime in the future, I don't want them to think, well, that was a mistake, and keep hearing that. So I did a 23andMe test, just to try and confirm things. And
Right.
that's where my niece had tested originally, and ended up my brother tested there too, because my niece got him one for Christmas that year also,
Hmm.
and we did match as half siblings, not as full siblings, and so that really confirmed things. And he has
Hmm.
matches people with the right last name that I'm missing. So that confirmed things. I never had to hear that again. And the other thing I told them both, I said, now obviously this means genetically we're half brother, half sister relationship. I said, I'll never say half again in your presence, because you're my brother,
Right.
you're my sister. I said,
Hmm.
I'm on,
Yeah, I relate to that.
yeah, I'm on groups and discussion boards and stuff on Facebook, and that's the discussion there. But not, when you're just talking about genetics. But you're my brother, you're
Right.
my
You're just trying to
sister.
identify who's who.
Yeah, your kids are my niece and nephew. It's not never going to be the half thing again. And that's been the case. We're not terribly, terribly close. They both live in the area here, and I don't. They see each other a lot more than I see either of them, just because my sister's husband and my brother both work at the same place.
Oh,
But
yeah, that'll do
yeah,
it.
but I'm very satisfied with their response. They've been very supportive. We got together for something recently, and they never even mentioned it, and which was wonderful, because it wasn't about me. That of what we were there
Right.
for. It doesn't have to be talked about every time we get together.
Yeah, I think that's a good feeling. Like
But
you can like it's settled in.
yeah, trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to convey. I mean, that's pretty much it. This letter writing process. I wrote a letter to my mother, that what I would say to her,
Hmm.
and I tried to express that if you had told me, I found that I was really mad at her, not for what she did, but just that she didn't tell me of the possibility.
Right.
And when I wrote the
So
letter to
common.
my, yeah, and if you had told me and asked me not to tell anybody, I wouldn't have. Now,
Hmm.
but you didn't tell me anything, and now that I know, it's my story, and I'm free to do what I want with it, not out of spite or anything, but just trying to find if there is anybody who has a clue.
Yeah.
So, but then the letter I wrote to my biological father it came across, I was really bitter and mad at him just for what he did. And I know it
Hmm.
takes two to tango, but you know,
Hmm.
it just that obviously I wouldn't have ever have known him. There was no
Right.
opportunity since he died so young. But um, but that again, just talking to them both abstractly, I was more upset with him for what happened. You've messed up my life, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And but I
Sure.
that
Well, you can't
yeah,
help your feelings. It sounds like the letter writing process has been helpful.
it really has. My wife first kind of suggested it, and then the therapist thought it was a good idea too. And I got I write it, and I it seems like I throw a lot of facts in there, and then I go back and put in feelings, and then it's like I don't really, you know, break down and let my emotions out until I'm reading it out loud,
Hmm.
which is it's kind of an interesting process. I'm learning a lot about myself through all this, not just what my, you know, what's written on my chromosomes, but
Oh, sure.
it's really been, it really leads you to question, you know, how much that the nature nurture thing. You know, my father was a civil engineer, and you know, and I was really inspired to get a college degree and have a professional career because of that. The father that raised me, you know,
Yeah,
Emmett, I
yeah.
think he was a bank teller. He had gone to college for 2 years, but was a bank teller and part time bookkeeper for the bank. And you know, I just wonder if I've seen one picture of him. The C gave me
Hmm.
one of the pictures she had. She said, "You can have all my pictures because if he's not my dad, I don't need them anymore." And
Oh,
she
wow.
well she was 7 when he died, and a lot of those years she said actually she spent with her grandmother, her mother's mother,
Hmm.
for whatever reason. And so she offered me, she had 3 pictures of him, and I only took the one that was just him because the other 2 had her mother in them.
Hmm.
But
So, wow. So did so just from a just to clarify the timeline
mhm,
between C and G, Ruby had one baby that she was raising, and then she had another child that she gave for adoption,
yes,
or the other way around.
yep. She had
Wow.
C, and then you know, and then married Emmett the next year, and then Emmett died 6 years later, and she still had, you know, still had C there, and although, like I say, some of
Hmm.
those years she wasn't actually with her and Emmett, but then 3 years later she had G, before she remarried, and she gave G up for adoption, and then
Hmm.
actually then she did remarry about a year later and had a boy, and kept him. You know, that was with the second husband, and so actually,
So just
I
questions and mysteries everywhere.
yeah, yeah. G found out who her biological father was, but I want to mention Amber, my search angel. Thank you again, Amber, and and I are trying to find C's,
Thank you, Amber.
yeah, trying to find C's father. You know, because she doesn't know still. We're not having a whole lot of luck getting matches and things, but
Huh.
you know, we're trying to find that, and that's kind of become a real quest for me. You know,
Hmm.
if I gave her the news and asked her to take the test and then gave her the news that took away who she thought her father was, I'm going to try and find out who he was. But Amber's doing all the real work on it, I think.
Wow. So does eh, the only way that it will work to find C's father is if people from his lineage have submitted stuff to one of these companies.
Yeah, yeah. There's going to have to
Okay.
be a close match. We haven't got any matches closer than second cousin, I think, and not many of
Okay.
those. Uh, and um, and actually, Amber thinks there may be an NPE at work somewhere in the matches we've gotten. You know, that they may not be aware of or something. The trees and the
Right.
DNA maybe don't match, but yeah, that's,
Hmm.
yeah. I really want that to happen for her, because
Hmm.
I told her when I asked her to do the test, I said, no matter how it comes out, I'm going to come meet you, and you know, when we're in the area there, and get to know you, whether you're my half sister or not, because I had talked to her on the phone 4 or 5 times, I think, over that period, and you know, she's a sweet person, and I want her to I want her to have some peace in her sense of self too.
That's really nice of you. I think that's important to remember, that everybody involved in these scenarios are human,
Mm-hmm. And it's
and that we want connection so badly.
yeah, the groups on the internet are just amazing. Some of the stories and of course most of them are dealing with living, ramifications of the MPE event, and
Right.
but it's just neat to be in groups where you can be there for people and just listen and understand, and as if there's something that you can relate to, you can offer a little advice or comfort or whatever's called for. But it's just, we all know how we feel, and not many
Right.
people do.
Yeah. No, it's a totally amazing sort of phenomenon to be experience something so isolating, but then discover how many other people are experiencing it as well. So it's
Yeah,
sort of like no one understands, and yet more people than you expect understand.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know I've seen people guess what the percentages might be of how many actually existed, or somebody in one of the groups one day said, just what exactly was going on, in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
And I said, well, what was going on is the same thing that's going on now, just nobody talked about it.
Yeah. No, I think you're right.
And if, people were afraid of it getting out, and that's why, that person like Ruby would go away and have a child and give it up for adoption. And I think hardly anybody in her family knew.
Yeah.
But
yeah, so much secrecy.
Yeah, so much secrecy, shame,
Yeah.
and a lot of us NPE type folks get fingers pointed at us, and all we do is just say, "This is all I found this out." I didn't cause
Right.
them to do anything. I didn't arrange my conception or whatever. There's a lot of messengers being shot in our world here, I think, figuratively.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. People don't know where to put their it's like confusion that turns into anger or something, and they don't know where to put it, so they put it at the person that's saying it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I love hearing that you are trying to be of service to people, and you're already a person that really likes to be a part of the community and help out. And it sounds like you're finding a way to use those traits with your newfound information too.
Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't you? I know how much it hurts. I know how strange the feeling is. It goes from pain to just a lasting feeling of difference. In a post a couple weeks ago, I said, on December 28th, from then on, I don't feel like I used to feel. And it's hard to convey that, but when people that have gone through it, they don't have to convey it to us. We know we've been there. We're going to be there. I mentioned I had cancer. Thank God for a great surgeon. It was removed 14 years ago, and it was cured. But it could have killed me. This isn't going to kill me, but it can't be cured.
Right.
It's a weird. I don't want anybody that's had cancer to jump on me for saying that, but it's I've had both, and one's a lot worse than the other, but that one was found early and was cured, and this one can't be. And this one's found late. I mean, 62 years late.
Right. Right. I think that's a great way to look at it.
Well, I want that.
Great way.
I hope I said that well, because again, I don't want to give the wrong impression.
I think you did. Nobody jump on Dick. I'll defend you. I understood what you meant.
Thank you. Yeah, you know. You know.
Yeah, I do know. I do know. Well, this is so great. I'm so glad that we finally got to connect. Listeners don't know this, but Dick and I have been sort of in conversation for a few months now, just
Hmm.
because I was interested to know who might be in West Virginia, because I have to go there every 4 to 6 weeks. And I thought, well, there's another place I can look around,
Yeah.
and connected with Dick, and it's been really great. So I've been wanting to get him on tape for a while, and we finally did it,
Hmm.
and with a few hiccups there in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think this one's going to work. I'll let you know,
Okay.
Dick, if we have to do this
That's
again. Um,
that's fine. That's fine.
yeah,
It's therapeutic talking about it. Every time I talk about it, I think, it helps. But Eve, it's great to finally. Obviously, I've heard your voice before, but on the other episodes, but it's nice to talk to you, and we do have to get together when next time you're
yeah,
back. There are three others in Huntington here that I know of. Two of them I know personally. That I think,
yeah. I remember you mentioned that once we were talking. I just
yeah,
like, I mean, it's something to do with small
uh
towns,
huh,
but it also has to do with just how common this
yeah,
is. Can't wait to meet everybody.
yeah. Well,
All
yeah. If you
right. Well,
let us know when you're coming, and I'll get as
I
many
will.
of them together as I can, and we'll get together for dinner or something, and have just our own little NPE table there.
Yeah, that'd be so fun. I'll be back in the
Right.
fall. Well,
Thank you so
this was a
much.
great way to end my week and begin my weekend. And hope you have a nice weekend. I heard thunderstorms. I hope you guys get some nice
Yeah,
weather.
I think they're over for now. I got a lot of mowing to catch up on, but yeah,
Oh, okay.
but yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I hope we didn't collide talking too much there. That you have to do a lot of editing, but it's weird. I hosted a podcast for a little while about Marshall football, and
Hmm.
I've tried to watch my pauses and things, but here I was the one on the other end of the questions here, and some required a little thought or choosing the right word or whatever. But I hope it's not too hard to edit.
No, I think it's going to be fine. And um, part of this podcast for me is that it just has to be imperfect. Like we're just trying to have a conversation, and sometimes people talk over each
Yeah.
other. So I'm sure it'll be great. I will let you know as soon as I know when it's going to be
Okay.
up.
Okay. Eve, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Dick.
All
Have
right.
a
You
great
too.
weekend. Thanks.
Bye bye.
Bye.
I think when I think back on what I've got so far, that I've got a few people on the podcast who have like very few places to go to get their questions answered, or very few people to answer their questions. But it feels like Dick was the first person I talked with who just has nowhere to turn, like no one to ask. And I picture him standing with his face like right up against a brick wall. And it's got to be so frustrating. I can't even imagine it. And every story has its facets of frustration or victory. And there's lots of things frustrating about getting the answers. Sometimes they're not what you want. But the unknown is just such a difficult place for the human condition to stay in. But of course, Dick is taking it in stride. And I just love the way he's staying busy and the way he uses his experience to help others. He's just a great guy. Just what a guy. I'm so glad I got his story. Yeah, so here we are. Just a small reminder that I am basically on maternity leave right now, but you can keep up with all things related to the podcast by following us on social media. Facebook and Instagram are both at Everything's Relative Podcast. Come find me. And if you want to tell your own DNA story or have questions or comments, go ahead and send me a message. My email is eve@everythingsrelativepodcast.com. And that is it for this week, you guys. I'll see you in 14 days for episode 8. Thanks for coming along with me on this adventure. And I hope your summer is going great. Bye-bye.
Everything's Relative with Eve Sturgis is produced by Kaylin Egan and Eve Sturgis. Eve Sturgis is a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California, but the conversations she has on the podcast are not therapy sessions. Logo design by Ivy McNally and music used with permission by Goodbye the Band.